Hey everybody, and welcome back to our Bible study series. In this series, we're going to be doing the book of Revelation. So in this episode, we're just going to be doing a little introduction about the book of Revelation. Did you know that there is over 500 verses in the Bible that talks about Jesus coming again? And in the New Testament, 1 out of every 25 verses talks about Jesus' return. In the Bible, 2/3 of the Bible is talking about prophecy, and over half of those prophecies have already come true. Have you ever felt like you hear the same Bible stories over and over again, and you think there's got to be more in the Bible than that? Mostly because people are afraid to look into prophecy. So if 2/3 of the Bible is prophecy and you only learn about the parts of the Bible that aren't prophecy, you're only learning 1/3 of the Bible. Imagine if you took a book and you read it and you memorized it and you took classes on it, but then you never actually read how it ended. That would be ridiculous. And yet that is what we do with the book of Revelation. We're too afraid to jump into it and to study it. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, sometimes people can get a little bit crazy with the book of Revelation. You get into a lot of conspiracy theories. So we just don't want to be associated with that. And sometimes there are really big arguments that break out over the book of Revelation and how it's to be interpreted. Remember that Satan will divide Christians over anything, including the Bible. So I have seen Christians get into really big arguments, and churches even divide over the Bible. And so sometimes pastors and churches are afraid to jump into the book of Revelation because it can seem too controversial. And some people don't want to say the book of Revelation because it just seems too complicated. So my goal with this series is just to do a short video before each chapter so that you can get a basic idea of what the chapter is going to be about, and then you can go and study it and read it for yourself. And the Holy Spirit will help you to understand. It's not as hard as people make it out to be. So a little bit of the background before the book of Revelation. It was written by John, and he was the youngest of the disciples, and he was the last disciple to die. John was banished to an island of Patmos by the Roman authorities. We'll get into that in a little bit. So at the time of the book of Revelation, Rome was still in charge of the nation of Israel, and a man named Domitian was in charge, and he was really bad. He became the ruler after his brother Titus. So he had all these fights with the senators, like the Senate hated him. He killed a bunch of people. He went to war with what would today be Scotland and Britain. So he had big wars with those two areas of the world. He was ruthless and extremely paranoid. So when he was the leader, that is when Peter was killed, and he blamed Christians for everything. So if there was a famine, he blamed it on the Christians. If there was an earthquake, he blamed it on the Christians. Any natural disaster at all, he said like the Christians had sent it. So he was constantly killing Christians and blaming them for everything. So it was during this time period that Timothy was killed. He was actually clubbed to death by a group of, like a big mob came and attacked him and clubbed him to death. Nicodemus was also killed during this time period. So here's John and all the things that John went through. So Jesus called John to be a disciple in about AD 27. And then around AD 30 is when the church was started, and John immediately became a leader in the church. Around AD 67 is when Peter and John were killed. And then AD 70 is when the Romans came in, and this is a big part of Jewish history. This is when the Romans came in and destroyed the temple. And this would be the second temple that had been built. The first temple was built by Solomon, the second temple was built by Zerubbabel, and then added on to by Herod, and then in AD 70 is when the temple was destroyed. In AD 90 is when John wrote his gospel and his letters, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. And then in AD 93, John was sent to Patmos, and then he wrote the book of Revelation in AD 95. One of the other interesting things about John is that before they sent him to Patmos, they tried to kill him by boiling him alive in oil. So when you're reading through Revelation and you're reading about John, remember that at this point John would have been an older man. He also would have been full of scars from his beatings and from being boiled alive in oil and then surviving it. And then also he'd been on the island for a couple of years before he wrote the book of Revelation. All right, so before you jump into the book of Revelation, one of the reasons that some people get confused about the book of Revelation is because they haven't studied the book of Daniel. And that's why I did a video series on the book of Daniel. So if you started watching this but you haven't gone through the book of Daniel, stop here. Don't continue on into the book of Revelation. You need to go back. You need to have a really good grasp on the book of Daniel. There's a reason God put the book of Daniel in the Bible first before Revelation. You really have to understand that. So go back and do that. The second thing I want you to know about the book of Revelation is that really it's an amazing book full of praise and worship. I'm going to read something here for you. To him be glory and dominion forever and ever. You are worthy, O Lord, to receive glory, honor, power, blessings, honor, glory, and power to him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb forever and ever. Blessings and glory and wisdom, thanksgiving, honor, and might to our God forever and ever. These are just some of the worship verses that you can find in the book of Revelation. So, are you ready? We're going to jump in. The next episode is going to be Revelation chapter 1. So you're watching Bible study, and this is the book of Revelation.